Hello and welcome back to the Championship Lowdown podcast. I am once again joined by Chris as always. Welcome back to the channel, Chris.
Yep, good to be back. Another exciting game week.
Yeah, we actually have a quite good game week to go through this week, so we will not waste any time. We will get straight into the action, and what better way to start it than at a massive upset in Oxford on Friday night football. Oxford come through and beat what was a flying Ipswich side 2-1 at the Sam to give them a huge win in their battle against relegation. It was Mark Harris and Przemysław Placheta cancelled out a Leif Davis goal for Ipswich, which means Oxford get a very valuable 3 points, and more importantly, out of the bottom three, sat in 20th place in the league. Ipswich, however, drop out of the playoffs after being sat there before the game. So overall, Chris, I think this is the biggest upset we'll discuss all day.
Yeah, and I mean we spoke about Ipswich last week and on last week's review and the points they could pick up, and called that Norwich point they pick up in midweek exactly as well. Ipswich, for a team you thought would be up there competing for automatics straight away, you just have to be so disappointed as a fan and wonder how much can be done at that club. What's going wrong? Is it McKenna? Is it the players? This division's weird, and I think the one thing I'll say is when you look at the teams in the playoffs right now, the amount of red up there on the form table currently is baffling for this division. It's just, other than Coventry, the top 8 just have so much red in their recent form.
Yeah, I mean, look, this Ipswich side, as we sort of said, that we thought, yeah, this is it now. They've kicked on. They'll be fine. They'll be in the playoffs, and probably even competing with automatics. I think we thought going into the week, but now obviously we sort of said, and I said it a few weeks into the season. I was like, as much as these teams start well, if they continue to perform and the teams at Ipswich struggle, that gap will never come down, and they will not be able to catch the teams above them. And Middlesbrough now open a 6 point gap to Ipswich and are on a better run of form after struggling a bit. They've only lost one of their last 5. So you've got to be careful as it switching games like this. I mean, no one expected them to go to Oxford and come out with nothing. But you've got to give credit to Oxford where it's due as well, because as much as we can focus this all on Ipswich and how they should have won and they didn't, and that's disappointing. I think at the same time, you've got to look at Oxford and be like, wow, this is a team battling for their lives at the bottom of the table at the minute, and they've come out at home in front of their fans and they've beaten one of the better teams on paper in this entire division. You look at Mark Harris, not had the best of years after doing really well in parts last year, and he gets a big goal in this one. And then obviously Placheta has come up in big moments for Oxford this season already, and this will probably be the biggest moment he'll have for at least a few months as far as this Oxford team goes, you'd imagine. But that's a huge win for them. They're now out of the relegation zone, which they needed to be. Obviously, Portsmouth will now drop in. They also leapfrogged my Swansea, unfortunately, now up to 20th place. So, as we said, so much can change in this division, and one run of form will climb you out of this relegation zone. But yeah, I just think, as much as not the great result for Ipswich, I think you've got to give Oxford their due, Chris, and say fair play. You've gone out there and you've got a massive win, which could be huge in the context of their season.
Yeah, and I think that shows how much getting an experienced manager can do for you in this division, no matter what the capabilities of your squad is, because we know it in the fairest of ways, Oxford, they probably are the smallest team in this division, which is no insult. I mean, it's not. When you look at the teams that are there, it's fair to say, I think. But Gary Rowett is a brilliant manager, experienced at this level, and he just seems to have brought something new to this club, and it's all about solidifying. But one thing I will say about the form as well, discussing the form of the playoff teams currently, does that not speak about the teams that are currently there? Because the teams that are in those playoff spots, how many of those teams at the start of the season would you have expected to say were there? I know we're always full of praise for Stoke, but we know what they're like, and they slip off easily, they underperform and things like that. Preston, I massively underestimated and backed for relegation at the start of this season. So I think it just speaks about the shock of the teams that are up there competing, and still kicking on at this stage, because I think there's a few that we thought maybe they won't be there long, it'll fall off, but it seems to have fallen off and no one capitalised on it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, if you base it off preseason predictions, I think only Coventry were the only team in that top six in general that I put in the top six is what I thought would happen. So, funny enough for you, if you swap Preston and Norwich in your predictions, you would have been bang on at the minute. But yeah, look, as you said, it's just surprised everyone. As far as Ipswich go, this is not a team that should be battling within the playoff spots. This team should be steamrolling this division. They really should. We've seen it so many times, and we've seen it like Leicester, for example, not this year, obviously, but the last year they were in this division. They absolutely walk it. We've seen Burnley walk it. We saw Leeds walk it last year. So these teams with the quality, they just tend to come in and they're fine and they win the league, and it's not really ever in question. This is the first year we've sort of been like surprised at the league leader. I think as much as we all expected Coventry to be a playoff team, them to be as many points clear as they are, and on their goal difference, I don't think anyone saw that one coming before the season. Even the most ambitious Coventry fans probably didn't think they'd be top of the league after however many 17, 18 games we are into the season. So yeah, look, as you said, this is two teams that need results, and Oxford in very much a different way to Ipswich, but Oxford coming out with a huge win for them, which now puts them in a really good stead to kick on. Obviously, have that massive game on Saturday against Swansea, where that could be make or break for both of them two teams if they lose that game. So the pressure's on, but they've brought a win into that game, where Swansea, as we'll speak about, brought a loss into it. So it'll be intriguing to see if they can sort of manage this form moving forward. But we will move on to our second game, which is Leicester City versus Sheffield United. Now, I actually saw this one coming, I believe, in my predictions, albeit not a lot of people did, but a goal frenzy, you could say, at the King Power Stadium, which ends in disaster for Leicester again. A 3-2 defeat at home, thanks to Tom Cannon. Jairo Riedewald had two goals came in the first 4 minutes. We thought this could be an absolute rout. Leicester then City Peck, adds the third goal. Leicester tried to come back into it, couldn't quite get there in the end. So a nervy end for Sheffield United was collected with 3 points. And again, a big 3 points for them, as they're now up to 19th and now 2 points clear of the relegation spots. As far as Leicester, they're now 16th in the league and creeping down that table quickly. And I think we spoke about this on our sort of preview episode for this week after the defeat to Southampton, Chris. But you have to say Marti Cifuentes is in big, big trouble.
Yeah, I don't think he sees the new year in with Leicester at this rate. It's a strange one because he was a decent manager at QPR. You could have seen him with a team higher up in the division. Maybe really impressed with him when he first came into QPR and they were in trouble. Leicester are just another team that's odd. Like we said, like Ipswich, the quality's there. You look at players like Abdul Fatawi, for instance, who was outstanding in pre-season, and I was looking at him in pre-season and the goals he was scoring. I think it was Fiorentina they played in pre-season where he was absolutely fantastic. And I backed him to have a good season, and that could be the player who, was the reason Leicester went back up. But it's all... A lot of players there just seem like they don't want to play for Cifuentes. I'm not the first person who's made that shout. I have seen that made a few times online. But I think the danger is as well when you look at... We speak about teams falling from the Premier League, and you look at what's just happened to Luton. I think there's a few teams, Leicester and Southampton being examples of those, who could be in danger of soon slipping back down to League One, perhaps.
No, I think Leicester will be fine. I don't think they're in any threat of relegation. I think they're absolutely fine because I don't think Cifuentes will last much longer at this club. What I will say is I sort of saw this one come in. I sort of bracketed Cifuentes in that category with Ruben Selles of an okay manager but doesn't fit a club in win now mode. They're very much project managers, and they take a while to embed their sort of philosophy. And at clubs like QPR, you can sort of withstand to have the patience to be able to wait for that to click. At Leicester, you can't do that. This is a team that needs to get promoted straight back to the Premier League for many reasons. We've seen their financial issues off the pitch being a big one towards that. If you just look at this team, on paper, it just doesn't look like it looks good, and then you wonder like, is it as good as we think? You know, you've got so much talent on like Fatawu, Mavididi, arguably is one of the best wingers pairings in this entire division, if not the best. You know, you got Patson Daka, who just a couple of seasons ago was a very usable Premier League striker, who's now struggling to get goals in the Championship. You've still got Jordan James in this midfield, who's a superb footballer. But then I think you have to question at the back. You know, you've got Asmir Begovic in goal at the minute, which is sort of just like, very much a plug gap fill while they lost Hermanson in the summer. You've got, Wout Fass, who we've spoken about many times on this podcast, just isn't quite the player that we all thought he might be. Vestergaard as well, the similar sort of story. So yeah, for Leicester, I think they'll be fine. I think the second Cifuentes is gone, which I don't think will be very, very far away in the near future. I think they'll be absolutely fine, and they'll be able to mount a charge back up this table with how close it is with the positions down the bottom. But Sheffield United, again, credit to Chris Wilder. He's finally sort of clicked with this team and got them back firing. Us 3 wins on the spin now, all with 3 goals scored in every one of them 3 wins. So you've got to give them credit. That's 9 goals and 9 points in 3 games. You can't really ask for much more from your team. They now enter a bit of a tougher run, so it's going to be interesting to see how they cope with that. But as I said, we knew Sheffield United wouldn't be in any relegation danger, and they're slowly climbing their way out of it now. And I think it's going to expose teams like Portsmouth, Swansea, Oxford, Blackburn, Charlton, etc., to be the ones who are actually in trouble as they sort of slip down and Sheffield United climb up, Chris.
Yeah, I know we said Sheffield United weren't really going to be the team who were going to be in that fight for long. Me and you have said recently, I think we said it on last week, that Norwich could be that team who have been exposed as a team who could be there. The result went their way this weekend, but as I predicted last week, those Oxford points they dropped are massive for a team like Norwich to drop at home in this situation. But that goes to show as well the impact of bringing in Chris Wilder to Sheffield United. And it also shows Leicester what they need to do. They've brought in Chris Wilder. They've brought in someone who knows the club, who knows how to get things clicking at the club, who knows how to get the team playing, because he's only been there shortly after. And as I said about Leicester being a team who could slip into danger in League One, by no means that isn't this season at all. However, in order to get that charge at the table, like you said, they are capable of doing, the first thing is getting the right appointment. Because if you make the wrong appointment again, you just put yourself back in square one of what's going on with Cifuentes right now. And as you said, with Begovic in goal, Vestergaard, players like that, and the talent they have up front in Fatawu, I would absolutely say that priority number 1 in January for Leicester to sort this season out is their defence.
Yeah, I think the financial issues don't help as well. This is a club who've been in dire trouble with finances, so that probably is a big reason why they didn't make as many signings as they would have liked to in the summer, albeit they still did make quite a few and some substantial ones as well. But yeah, they need to get that appointment right, as you said. This can't be another sort of long-term outlook manager. This needs to be a win-now manager that they get in. I think, you look at the likes of Gary O'Neill or Brendan Rodgers in that sort of aspect of just getting in and getting this team clicking and firing quick, because you need an experienced head now to sort of take this team back to where they should be, rather than going for someone like Cifuentes, who, as I said, I didn't really understand in the first place. It was a very long-term outlet manager for a team that really desperately needs to win now, so I didn't really understand it. And I think a loss to Derby on Saturday should be the end of Cifuentes' run. As I also said before the break, he probably should have gone after that Norwich win, because albeit it was a win against Norwich, they barely got that one over the line. 2 very last-minute goals to be able to get through that one. So yeah, intriguing situation. We'll see how that one plays out in the coming weeks with Leicester. But we will move to Stoke versus Hull City. And it wasn't actually in our original plans, but we've sort of been brought to attention about the other details in this game. So obviously it was a 2-1 win for Hull. A last gasp winner for Hull, to get them massive 3 points away at a very, very good Stoke team. It was Joe Gelhardt who got that goal in the 90th minute. Which cancelled out another Sorba Thomas goal, who's on fine form for Stoke, but it wasn't enough, unfortunately, for them, as they slipped down to 4th in the Championship now, 3 points behind Middlesbrough in their automatic promotion places. But it was very much the outside issues on this one, Chris. We obviously saw the massive fight break out at the end of the game after the Gelhardt goal. Missed penalty in this game, I believe, as well. You look to other details such as that, a goal that was potentially handball. So a lot of things to unpack in this game, but overall, much needed win for Hull to boost them back up into that playoff contention race after a pretty dire run going into it.
Yeah, and again, as we said earlier about results having gone the way, I think there'll be a bit, Sheffield Wednesday could have done them a favour, but in what, despite being a game that had 5 goals in, actually looking at statistically was uneventful as well. But yeah, the events off the pitch are more of a talking point here, and I'm not really sure what happened. One thing I do want to say though, that Stoke goal to open the scoring was absolutely outstanding. I don't think you could expect anyone to stop that goalkeeper wise.
No, I mean, it was a superb strike from Silva Thomas. The way he adjusted himself as well to sort of get behind it and smack that home. You've sort of just got to say, fair enough, we'll let them have that one. But just a massive fight breaks out at the end of the game. I believe there was 5 yellow cards shown, I want to say, in this game in the last 3 minutes of time. Carl Joseph, Ashley Phillips, John Lundstrom, Matt Crooks, and Boston Lawal were all booked post the 96th minute. So it all kicked off in a massive sort of fashion towards the end of the game. I think everyone sort of said huge scrap, but I think referee decisions in this game, as we said, with the missed penalties and stuff like that, it sort of overshadows it. And I think it was topped off by this massive fight at the end where 5 yellow cards are shown. Sort of a very scrappy affair, which is what we tend to expect from teams like Stoke. But for both these two teams, the sort of teams that we sang their praises about quality in their squad, Chris, but never really clicks for teams like Stoke and Hull in terms of the league. But 4th and 7th, you have to say, is it finally that year where these two teams have found their sort of rhythm in this division?
I think if you'd say any team have found their rhythm more, it's Stoke. I think with Hull, they're a bit overperforming per se. And again, I think that goes down to the teams that aren't performing in this division. Hull have got a good squad, and players like Joe Gelhardt getting the winner in this game. That's a player who massively needs that sort of boost from his time before Hull, like at Leeds, for instance. So I think if there's anyone who has clicked, it's Stoke, despite the fact that Hull have come out the winners here. But it just goes to show how topsy-turvy this table is, because there's so many teams in this division just not where they should be.
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway from this game is from a player perspective anyway, is Mohamed Baloumi. Obviously, this was a key player for Hull, and he's missed a lot of time this season through injury. I believe this was the first time he's played 45 minutes in the entire season so far. He's very much struggled to get on the pitch. But obviously came on at half time to sort of try and change his game around for Hull when they were looking for a way back in, and he gets 2 assists off the bench, and that's how they end up winning this game. So I think the big one for Hull was obviously we've seen them without Baloumi, without McBurney, without Liam Miller, and they've had other injuries leading up to sort of games in the season. So they need these players back fit. Obviously Baloumi now back in that team with 2 assists is huge. McBurney's very close to returning, I believe. Liam Miller a bit longer, but they've coped really well in the games without these big players, which shows that they've got very solid depth. This team, Joe Gelhardt, for example, again stepping up in need for an attacking threat when McBurney's been on the sideline. So I'm sure he'll have his hat in the ring to be starting this team for the rest of the year. But as far as Stoke goes, it's a weird team. Again, it's another weird result for Stoke. They've now lost their last 3, so very inconsistent. But 3 losses in the last 5 isn't good enough for a team that wants to be competing for the automatics. They now face, Sheffield United and Ipswich back-to-back, which is not going to be an easy task either. You'd imagine they struggle to get 3 points in both of them games. So it'll be intriguing to see where they go from there, Stoke. But yeah, I mean, I'm still impressed by Hull as much as maybe said Stoke clicking a bit more, more so with how Hull have coped so well without the key players at large parts of the season. And also for, Djurkiewicz as the new manager to come in and, cement himself as this sort of, competitive team. It's a massive step from a Hull team that we thought would be in serious trouble of potentially being relegated this year.
Yeah, and the other thing with Stoke is I think it goes to show the appointments, because in recent years they've not had the appointments go right. We saw how disastrous appointing people like Schumacher was for the club. So I think the credit goes to the appointment of Robbins, recognising an experienced manager for this division who's took a team to the playoffs, who I think you could argue when Coventry did reach the playoffs under Robbins, maybe they weren't really a team you'd have expected to be in the playoffs back then, as opposed to the level they're at now. Even more so when you consider that Robbins has a habit of taking a team from a relegation zone to a playoff spot in the same season. So again, it's just a matter of getting the appointment right.
Yeah, as you said, you pretty said that perfectly there. They finally got that appointment right, and it's finally a manager who can unlock the quality in this team. But we'll move on to another sort of, I mean, you could say shock sort of result. You may disagree with that on the positions in the league table, but Millwall, Southampton, a big 3-2 win for Millwall at the Den over a very informed Southampton. As I said, I know a lot of people would have said this is an upset, but obviously if you look at it, Millwall are third and Southampton are 14th. So if you based it on that, you wouldn't be so sure. But Southampton came into this game with 4 wins on the spin and a superb run of form since Tom de Rackett took over from Will Still as the interim manager. And it was, again, another last-gasp goal, Chris. Tristan Kramer with the goal in the 97th minute to get Millwall all 3 points. In this one, he also got an assist earlier in the game as Femi Aziz and Caleb Taylor got the 2 goals for them, which cancelled out an Armstrong penalty. And Finn Azaz again with another goal for Southampton in a very good run form after a struggling start to the year. But, I mean, can you name a more Millwall thing, Chris, and then being third in the league with a -3 goal difference?
I was just about to point that out to you because I remember us talking about this at the end of all the games at the weekend. And again, I think that is yet another thing that is just summing up this division this season. Is the fact that the team in third have a -3 goal difference. I mean, you just take a look at the goal difference in the league. You know, West Brom in 12th have a better goal difference than that in -2. Southampton are in 14th with a positive goal difference of 3. Watford are 15th with a positive goal difference of 2. It's just you don't even hit negative goal difference until you get to West Brom in 12th in this division, and you do have Hull and Derby in the top half also with a goal difference of 0. So it's just another thing showing how upside down this division has been. And when you look at recent weeks as well, I think it's showing that maybe some defensive quality is needed in this league, because the amount of 3-2 results we have looked at over the last couple of weeks, where you think last week we were leaving games off because we were struggling to pick a top 6 because there were that many 3-2s in the division this season. And yet again this week we've left a 3-2 off with Sheffield Wednesday Preston, because despite being a 3-2, it's just completely uneventful still, which I think sums up a Sheffield Wednesday game this season, unfortunately for them. But yeah, it's more just such a championship thing as much as it is just a Millwall thing.
I mean, we've got 3 on here, and so we've missed one out as well of 3-2 results this week. So as you said, there's just goals for fun going in everywhere. Apart from a Millwall, apparently, I suppose they're going in their net more than their own. But we have to look at the difference. I mean, Coventry have scored 28 more goals than Millwall this season. They're 2 places apart in the division. They've scored 26 more than Middlesbrough, who are their automatic promotion competitors at the minute. I mean, it sort of says volumes about how far away Coventry are from everyone else in this division as well, with the form, especially in front of goal, because 50 goals after 18 games is unheard of in this division. But yeah, just overall for this game, as you said, Millwall needed a win desperately. They've been in a bad run. They got the win over Sheffield Wednesday, and it was the perfect opportunity to build into this, and they did that. And, Millwall being third is just sort of like, what is going on? How has this happened? This whole top 6 is just how has this happened, really. But especially teams like Millwall, Preston, Stoke, even Bristol City, no one saw coming after, a pretty bad summer for them, losing Liam Manning. So it's a testament to this league and how exciting this league can be at times, and how it's basically impossible to predict, no matter what you think, you don't know. Whatever you think is going to be good will be rubbish. Whatever you think is going to be rubbish will be good. So it's pointless even trying to predict it at this point. And I know we still do our score predictions, but the amount of times we're wrong is unbelievable. Compared to if you do it for other sports, you could predict most results in a week. We can barely get the result right, let alone the score. So, just mental. But as far as Southampton goes, it's an end of their run of form, and I'm now very intrigued to see how they bounce back. Obviously, Birmingham at home is not going to be an easy test, and for an interim like Tondereka, this is where he sort of makes his worth of his money or not. If he's worth appointing for this full-time job, if he can bounce back from a pretty disappointed loss after a very good run of form of wins, if he can do that, then I think he might be the right man to lead Southampton forward.
Yeah, that win over Sheffield Wednesday for Millwall, that's despite you nearly condemning them midweek by once again predicting Sheffield Wednesday won't win for a while, and then once again on Saturday they take the lead within 2 minutes. And I think you speak things into existence, because this week you spoke about Sheffield Wednesday not winning a game for a while, and 2 minutes into the game week they've took the lead over Preston. And you've also spoke about Patrick Agyemang and his time at Derby and the goals he won't get, and he's also scored within 2 minutes of a game week. So if there's any predictions you guys want James to make that won't happen, if your team are on a bad run of form and need a win, just ask James to predict them to lose. And
well, I would agree with you, but I'm trying to do it with Swansea, and that still doesn't work because we still keep losing. So I can't do it with us, unfortunately. It seems to work for everyone else apart from the one club I need it to work for. But you're right. I don't know. It's just mental, isn't it? I mean, as I said, whatever you think you know, you don't know, because the second you try and predict something, it all goes horribly wrong. Luckily, I'm still right about Sheffield Wednesday, and because they did lose that game, but I've got a feeling it's not going to be safe for much longer. The last 2 games have been losses by 1 goal, especially this one. They scored twice against a fairly good Preston side, so safe to say I will be keeping an eye on that one. But as far as
you can't take a Patrick Agyemang goal away from him, though, so you're still wrong on that.
I can. When he scores more than 2 goals this season, I might admit that I was wrong about him. But until then, I'm not having it. 3 he's got, in 14 games for a striker. Excellent. Worth all £8 million, I am sure. But as we said for Millwall, a big win for them and a much needed one after a bit of a rocky run of form, which puts them in good stead to sort of keep their spot in the top half of the league. It's now in the top 3 of the league, I should say, at the minute. We'll move on, though, to Norwich versus QPR. And I said it last week, I thought Norwich would get their first win in a long time at home, this season at home. They've done it this week, their first win at Carrow Road this season. The first game, I believe, obviously they had Oxford, where it broke their run of losing every game at home to a draw. They've now not winning a game by winning 3-1 at home against QPR. Fairly convincing win, you have to say. It was Marcondes, an own goal from Mbang, and Amankwa, who got the 3 goals for Norwich, cancelling out an early Burrell goal from QPR. I've said it so many times, Chris. I don't know how many times I've got to say it about QPR, but I'm so not convinced with this QPR side being a competitive team in this division. And they prove it yet again with a bad result away at Norwich. As far as Norwich goes, it was a huge result because obviously teams like Sheffield United and Oxford got 3 points this week. So they don't lose touch too much with the sort of a safety point, which is Swansea at the minute. They're 4 points off safety as it stands, as Portsmouth drop in with them into the bottom 3. But Philippe Clement has finally broken the duck, Chris, and Norwich have a win at Carrow Road for the first time this season.
Yeah, I think it was a case of someone had to win this game. Both teams who just, despite the sort of gap in the table, QPR are safe where they are, but I suppose they could thank Coventry for that, for humbling them, and I think that woke them up a bit. And they're just a team who can never seem to click, QPR. I mean, you look at, for instance, I think if I saw something the other day, I think QPR are the only team in recent years who've been top of a division by this stage of the season and not gone on to get promoted. And that is because, was it 5 games they won for the remainder of the season from this point?
It was the Mick Beale year where he left when they were in a very good place and they only won 5 games for the rest of the season after the point where they were top after 15.
But so I think the other thing for QPR is they've shown how damaging this, in the past decade and a half, they've shown how damaging reaching the Premier League and getting it wrong when you reach the Premier League can be. And we've seen a lot of teams do it, but I think if there's any team that that have struggled the most since returning to the Premier League and falling back down, it's QPR. And that goes down to the money they spent in the Premier League. And I think there's a lot of fans in the Championship if you asked them, would they prefer their team to be in the Championship or the Premier League? As much as people, the Premier League is dubbed so many things, the promised land in England and things like that. But is it that so much now when you look at the way teams have gone, when they've gone up there in recent years? You look at your Lutons, you look at your QPRs, those for instances. I think if you asked a QPR fan, if your team were on the verge of reaching the Premier League, and you asked a QPR fan about going up to the Premier League, their response would just be, don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's plenty of teams who struggle to get back up, and they're one of them. But in terms of this season, as we said, everyone was sort of excited. They had their little run, and when they came to play us, and they won that game 1-0, I was said, and I'm not convinced. I don't think they're as good as people think they are, and I think they'll struggle to keep this up. And since I said that, they've only won twice in about 7 games. They lost 3 in the bounce after I said that. And this is a big loss away to Norwich, a side in absolute disarray, and you're giving them a 3-1 comfortable win, which they so desperately needed. I'm not saying QPR will be in any trouble of going down, but I just don't think they'll be a team that competes in the playoffs at all. I think they're just going to be stuck in mid-table again, which seems to be the sort of sight we get used to with QPR, as they have promising moments and then they build and build and build, but they never quite get to that finishing point. But yeah, for Norwich, it's a huge win. You cannot go understated how big this win is. They needed to break that duck to Carrow Road, and they've done it perfectly. With Philippe Clement now, it's about kicking on. It's 3 games for him, a win, a draw, and a loss. So, fairly steady start to time at Norwich, but you've got to be a bit more than steady when you're 4 points adrift from the safety positions. Obviously, with Swansea in such a bad run of form, which we'll get onto in a minute as well, it's a perfect chance to play catch-up when you can finally build on a good, a massive win. It's their first win in any game this season since August. So, it's a huge result for them, and it cannot be understated now. Taking back-to-back home games without a loss, which we have not seen from them. I don't know how far I'd actually have to go back to find the last time they didn't lose 2 home games in a row. I'm assuming it'll be a while, but a big win for Norwich. And as far as Oxford go, as far as QPR go, a concerning result again as far as how good they actually are. Speaking of bad results, though, we'll go to the final game we're going to speak about this week. And it's my Swansea City against West Brom. Now, if I had to do this on Saturday, I think I would have actually just refused to record the podcast because my head was so far gone after watching that game of football. So just to anyone who didn't see, we started really well. Zamba Potnik scores the second fastest goal in Championship history after 11 seconds to go 1-0 up. They think on an away day, that's the perfect start. It gets doubled down by Ethan Galbraith scoring a brilliant goal from the edge of the box after a lovely passing move after 11 minutes. And you think, wow, Swansea might be all right under Vitor Matos. It's clicking, 2-0 up at half-time, perfect. We come out the second half, and it all just goes down the pan. Hegebo scores twice in the early stages, and Jason Malambe gets a goal in the 85th minute to seal a big comeback win for West Brom. To be honest, Chris, I said, as far as Swansea go, I'm lost for where we go from here because, again, it's just like a team that has just given up and they've lost all confidence in their own ability because it's yet another game where we have had the lead and we were absolutely cruising at half-time to then come out in the second half and not even register a shot in a 3-2 defeat is more or less, it is just unacceptable.
Not only that, you saw my reaction when I fully looked in depth at the statistics to this game before we started recording, and that looks a complete. Statistically, that doesn't even look like 2 Championship sides that have played each other. I think any regular listeners, including the guys who normally do our preview shows, Ollie and Elliot and the others, we're absolutely looking forward to this one being on this week's show. And I don't think there was any way we could have got away with not having this on this week's show. I've lost count of the amount of things you've threatened to jump off since that result, including Wembley's Archers, which at least you went to Wembley with Swansea this season, I suppose.
It's just tragic, and I've just lost all. I've never once thought since relegation that we're in serious. We've been like down there, and we've been in that sort of area, but I've never once said, "Yeah, I think we're in trouble." Until now, I really do think we're in serious bother. This team is garbage. We've spent 15 million quid on 99% of just utter rubbish. Like, they're all rubbish. Burgess has been terrible since he came in, a Premier League player last season. genuinely wouldn't look out of place in League Two this year. That's probably being harsh. Stamanic was £2 million, hasn't really shown anything. Inus has struggled to really cement himself in this team. Struggles for starts. Adam Eder, £7 million, just bad. It's just all bad. I can't put it into perspective how it's just all bad. Ethan Galbraith is the one shining light in a massive dumpster fire of a transfer window. He's been superb and was good in this game as well. But there's too much persistence with players through like past credit in the bank. Omji Sung and Ronaldo, prime culprits of that. They cannot be starting wingers in the Championship. They're miles off the level. Absolutely nowhere near it. Liam Cullen's nowhere near the level anymore. Had one good year last year, but it's been garbage this year. Kabango's been nowhere near it. Josh Key's been nowhere near it. There's like 4 players in this team where I can point. I think, do you know what? They've been all right this year. And it's probably Vigouroux, Tymon, Galbraith and Vipotnik. Apart from that, I really can't give much credit to anyone else this season. As far as West Brom goes, I have to give credit to Ryan Mason because he did the bold thing of making 4 changes at half-time and completely changing his team around. And it paid off. They came out a different team in the second half and they win this game. So I've got to give credit due for West Brom. But as you can probably tell, Chris, and you could tell by my messages in the chat on the weekend, I'm not a very happy man at the minute supporting this football club.
No, not at all. And again, I know we spoke about another team that are showing just trying to make things work. Norwich will be relieved by that result, for instance. Oxford will be looking over their shoulders. So I think it's just a matter of getting another case of get the appointment right. It's another case of a team who've come down and struggled to make things click since coming down. So where to go from here? I think January is absolutely massive for you. The appointment's obviously massive for you. Whether it goes right remains to be seen. But I think, for instance, the defence massively needs sorting. And just in case anyone thought my Preston shout was bad, I put Swansea in a playoff finish. At the start of this season, and
I did call you mental at the time, in all fairness. I did give you a chance to change it before we recorded the video.
Yeah, it's hindsight. Can we just go back and edit that video and say I meant Preston and Swansea were the relegation team and Preston were the playoff team?
It's just ridiculous, isn't it? My big thing with this is it's just a mess at the minute. We've got no football people leading this football club. We have Tom Gorringe and Adam Worth, who Gorringe, for example, is great with the sort of outside of football things, bringing people in, as we've seen with Snoop Dogg, Luka Modric, etc., Martha Stewart, but it's all well and good having these people on the board, but they're not going to be interested if we get relegated. Adam Worth, the supposed god of recruitment, analysing all the data. I don't know what data he was looking at because all these signings he's made, bar 2, are literal rubbish, like completely useless. So it's not great luck on him either. I feel for Vitor Matos, I really do. He's been brought here. He's not allowed to bring his backroom staff over. I believe that is the case now. We can't hire his backroom staff due to visa complications or something like that, I believe it was. So that's a whole other problem. As much as we love Joe Allen and Leon Britton being in the building, they're not experienced coaches, and we're going to need some experience in this dressing room to get us out of this rut and, more importantly, get us away from the relegation zone, because, as I said, it's the first time I've been genuinely concerned that we're in trouble of being relegated to League One, and that's not what anyone wants. As much as you can see the draw with the fun season in League One where you actually compete for a change, it's not what you want to see. It's not ideal at all. So I am worried, I will say it. As far as West Brom, it's a massive win for them. They get the big win that they need under Ryan Mason. It's all down to him really making that change at halftime and going for it with them 4 changes. And he gets it. So fair play to them. They turned it around, and we've just yet again I have to question the character of our players, the mentality, because they don't look bothered. They just, every time we get into a leading position, it's just like we're so scared and we just play so scared. 3 shots in this entire game isn't acceptable. And the lack of creation from this team is alarming. We're still bottom on them expected goals charts, and as people have said, it always catches up to you eventually. And I think it will catch up to us soon, which it basically already is with these awful run of results, but I think it will continue to if we're not careful. But I will stop moaning about my awful football club, and we will go through the rest of the results from this weekend's action that we did not already mention. So we'll start off with Portsmouth, home to Bristol City, and an Anderson Mehmeti goal, Chris, gets them the 1-0 win. So overall, Bristol City back into the playoffs, and more importantly, Portsmouth drop into the bottom three.
Yeah, I think Portsmouth were the team we called in danger of slipping into that bottom three the most. I'm always full of praise for Oxford, unfortunately. You'd think I was an Oxford fan on this podcast, really, wouldn't you? But again, Portsmouth aren't really the team I'd back to be in that relegation fight for to be too deep into that relegation fight. But again, you've got to worry about Norwich now if you're Portsmouth, and Oxford certainly, and now Swansea for definite. And so it's all about the results that come during this Christmas period. I think this is the most telling time of the season for teams in this division. And we'll sort of, now the management changes have been made in where they need to be made and things like that. I think once Christmas is out of the way, you definitely do have a more in-depth look of where your team are going to be this season, and you're going to hate me for that statement, I'm afraid, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's just, I think for Portsmouth, it'll be a struggle. I think there's not a lot of quality in this team. They have areas where it's very good, but other areas where it's not so great. So it'll be intriguing to see if they can climb out of this mess, because we sort of thought last year they might be in trouble going into this year, because that home form was so good last year. It's hard to maintain that in this division, which they've struggled to do, with yet again another loss at Fratton Park in this one. Bristol City on a bit of an unconvincing run of form, but they get a big away win, which they needed, obviously, to climb back into the top six. So for them, it should be enough to go and kick on. We'll do another one. Coventry at home to Charlton. We saw a little bit of a scare here as Harvey Nibbs put Charlton 1-0 up after their awful run of form this one, but unfortunately it was 4 losses on the spin for Charlton at the hands of the basically unbeatable Coventry at this point. Elliot Sims with a brace and Josh Eccles goals made sure, Chris, there was no upset on the cards here in Coventry.
Yeah, they're starting to get a little reminiscent of the Fulham and Norwich teams we mentioned earlier on in this show, aren't they? And I think they're going to finish the season on a sort of similar level to those when you look at 50 goals scored.
Yeah, I mean, look, as we said, they're just unbeatable. They're undefeated. They've lost one game this whole season. They were like literally, you don't know how to do it. That's another 5 wins on the bounce. It's just ridiculous. Talk about responding from a first loss of the season by winning your next 5 games in a row against teams like Stoke, Sheffield United, West Brom, Middlesbrough, and Charlton. All teams that have occupied a spot in the top 6 this season, bar West Brom and Sheffield United, obviously. But yeah, it's very impressive. And this Coventry team is going to kick on now, and I think they're just going to keep pulling further and further clear, because there isn't really a contender to challenge them. No one's consistent enough below them to be able to catch up. So I don't want to say they're more or less home and dry after 18 games, but I would be amazed if this is a Coventry team that's not lifting the trophy to win this division when it comes round to May. Middlesbrough versus Derby. You spoke about Aguiman getting his goal, unfortunately, in the first 2 minutes. But it wasn't enough, as Matt Targett and Morgan Whittaker, funny enough, ex-Derby as well, Morgan Whittaker gets the winner in this one. Hayden Hackney with 2 assists as well from the midfield positions, as Borough climbed back into second, and Derby's they had their run, but now obviously only 1 win in their last 3, and it being against Swansea, which doesn't really count, Chris. Safe to say, without Carlton Morris, it's very much a different story for the Rams.
Yeah, we spoke about how they're going to fare without him, and I think we backed a difficult run of form. But I don't think you can be too critical of them either. I know Middlesbrough are inconsistent, but I think to go to the Riverside and put in a performance and lose narrowly is promising for a side like Derby, especially when you factor in Morris being out of the team currently.
Yeah, it was a tough game, as we said. It's not saying it was an easy game. They should have won, and they've lost. Obviously, Watford was disappointing, and beating Swansea only just as well, may I add. Not the best luck against a team that's struggling so much, but again, a tough loss away at the Riverside. I think we all expected it, but it's still a tough one to take for them. But I don't think it'll dent their sort of optimism too much for this season with how good Middlesbrough have been, especially with them sat second in the division. We mentioned it a few times in this podcast, but Sheffield Wednesday Preston did miss out on our sort of top 6, if you will. We'll also have to preface, I did not mention this at the start, but if you're wondering where Birmingham and Watford is, we're recording this on Monday. before that game was kicked off, so we cannot review a game that hasn't happened. But this one did, and Sheffield Wednesday put a scare up, certainly me after my no wins till the New Year prediction, going 1-0 up in this one. Preston made it equal to 1-1 very quickly, but then they went 2-1 up again, and it's sort of like, oh my God, I can't believe they're actually going to do this. They didn't, however, though, as Dobbin and Froyart Jensen gets the 2 goals at the end to seal this one for a 3-2 win for Preston. And in much, it was a scare, Chris, very much the result that we expected. They just made it a bit difficult for themselves.
Yeah, I think, again, at the start of the season, even though Preston are playoffs, if you looked at this fixture at the start of the season, you'd have probably expected it to be this close. You'd have probably expected a draw to be between these two sides. You know, you definitely wouldn't have expected Preston to be where they are currently. So I think here a draw would have been the fairest result. But as you said, I don't think your no wins till the New Year prediction is going to come true, because those 2 goals are a bit promising now. I think, you know, things are starting to settle down a bit at Hillsborough. So I think, provided they can just sort this defence out, some results could start coming Sheffield Wednesday's way, but it's not going to be the result you expect. I think this weekend is an opportunity for them. You know, a troubled Blackburn side who drew at Wrexham in the last minute, for instance. I think there's a few chances before the New Year for them in games like Derby County at home, for instance, and games like that have a chance for them.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, it's, you know, I don't think they will. I sort of, they shouldn't win a game based on the oppositions that they're playing, but they, you know, it's obviously the Championship and it's never going to happen. But they showed good signs in this one. Obviously, you know, it's a very good start to the game, but they faltered later on. They did have a lot of the chance. Obviously, you know, you have to look at the missed penalty from McNeil. It's hard to criticise someone who scored 2 goals in the game, but you also have to look at it from the fact that if he puts that penalty away, this game ends, 3-3, and it was at 2-2 when that penalty comes in as well. So it's a huge goal. You know, it could end at 3-2 if they put that penalty away. With Preston scoring just like, I believe it was 3 minutes after the penalty was missed. So, you know, it's a big mistake to make. Obviously, it's a good save from Iverson, don't get me wrong, but, you know, penalties, as a forward player, you should be scoring them. It really is that simple. Obviously, you know, we've had the news today, Sheffield Wednesday have been deducted a further 6 points, I believe, which takes their total to 18 points on the season that they've been deducted, and they're now set on -10. So, as we said, as much as we thought, oh, maybe a miracle could happen, now it's very much confirmed that they are going to be relegated at the end of the season. But just a big result for Preston, which they needed it, and it shows a bit of character in that Preston side to come back and win in such tough circumstances. Finally, probably the most boring game of the week, unfortunately, as much as it did end in a bit of style as well, is Wrexham 1, Blackburn 1. A good Johnson goal in the 13th minute looked to be the winner for Rovers at the racecourse, but Max Clareworth, who we've spoken his praises so much on the podcast this year, comes up big in the 95th minute to score the very, very important equalising goal for Wrexham, which keeps their unbeaten run alive again, just about, as they now climb to 9th in the table. Chris, are we going to have to look at Wrexham as a team that maybe is competing for the playoffs this year?
Yeah, like we said about their unbeaten run last week, where it just completely slipped by the run of form that they'd been on, being the only team that were unbeaten in their last 5 when we looked last week. So I think if the inconsistencies continue, you could certainly be looking at Wrexham as playoff contenders. And I think if you asked most fans at the start of the season, would they take a playoff charge from this team, they'd snap your hand off for it. Because as much as Wrexham fans can be, and we know how they can be in the nicest way possible, I think even they knew that this season was all about solidifying, that it was always going to be a culture shock. Parkinson had a lot to prove, but I think, again, Phil Parkinson, ever since taking over in the National League, he's had something to prove, because there's always been something about Parkinson that gets questioned every season. It was National League, where they walked the division, and I don't think anyone really saw them walk in the division in the way they did. It was then League 2, where people said the EFL would catch up to them. the difference in the financial rules between the National League and the EFL. They then come straight up from that, for instance. They then have League One, where they said, okay, but he's not League One level. And then you also had the financial giant of Birmingham City to compete with, which even Wrexham couldn't compete with Birmingham financially in League One. So you then threw that in, and people said Parkinson wasn't League One level, and he still won automatic promotion with that team in League One. There seems to always be a question about Parkinson and his abilities. And the way he responds has been fantastic, because there's never been a verbal response. There's just always been a response from his team on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty as well. I think we all are of sort of speaking about Parkinson at the start of this season and was like, not sure. I think he'd be one of the first managers gone. He ranked bottom in a lot of our manager ratings as well. And fair play, he's come out and he's proven a lot of people wrong, including us. So fair play to Wrexham. They're on a very good run of form. As far as Blackburn goes, them 3 points would have been huge because it would have pulled them 5 points away from the drop. Still 3, so they've still got that 1 game gap to the teams below them with that game in hand, which we're going to see on Tuesday night as well. Against Ipswich. So, you have to question how likely it is for them to win that. But if they were to do that, it's a big win for them. But yeah, overall, it's just 2 fairly okay sides, and Wrexham showing that they're not here maybe just to solidify this year. They're looking to put as good of an impression on this league as they possibly can moving through the year. But that is all we have for you for this week's review of the Championship action. Just before we go, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, over 93% of you who watch our videos are not subscribed, which is crazy. So please do subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. We need to try and get them subscribers up as quickly as possible. But thank you very much to Chris for joining me, as always, on our review episode, and we will see you all for our preview later in the week.